everyone sees the system's not working. People are being gouged. On top of it, the food doesn't taste good. Because right now we're feeding our kids garbage. We all know that.
And here comes the Maha movement. That shit's bad for you. That's really bad for you. That's going to make you infertile.
40% of your vegetables and 60% of your fruit
come from outside the United States.
Yes.
The Farm Bill is basically, let's prop up cheap food, and then let's make sure tons of people have SNAP government dollars to purchase that cheap food.
I think it's the single best thing we can do for rural America. Restore the family farm.
Well, look, we have an America First president, and this is about as America First as you can get as an issue. It's our land, and it is our food, and it is the cellular health and well-being of our people. I'm Nicole Shanahan. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public. Hi, Austin Frerick. It is such a pleasure to have you on Back to the People podcast today. I am midway through your fabulous book, Barron's: Money, Power, and the Corruption of America's Food Industry. And before we hopped on today, you said, hey, can you just do me one favor? My only request is that we end on a hopeful note. Well, why don't we start on a hopeful note?
Yeah. So let me start. One of my favorite, this is a weird thing to say as a writer, I don't like writing. I like this part the most.
Yeah.
And I've been joking to my husband that I'm on the rubber chicken circuit right now. I'm talking to those little hotels next to Interstate, all these conferences. I've been doing tons of those lately. I love them because, first of all, that's where you get the best gossip, and that's where you hear the coolest things.
Yeah.
But it's you see people doing it right who are barely getting by, but you see what the system could be.
Yeah, heck yeah. I mean, I'm now on speed dial for some of my favorite farmers across the United States, and they will text me and call me anything that comes up, any weird business, a rumor that they heard at the latest Department of Water Resources meeting. I get all of the best gossip from the family farm community because, like you said, this is a population of people that, they're second, third generation farmers. They're so connected to the land. They know their business inside and out. Yes. They know every macroeconomic occurrence that will trickle down and impact something going on their lot. I mean, it's really amazing.
I think that's what we see, the disconnect between the academy right now. And it's easy to look at Excel. It's really, people that live this have been doing this for decades. They know the nuances in a way that Excel will never tell you. This is so simple, but I'll never forget. I was in Kansas City at a Holiday Inn at a thing, and I met Greg Gunthorpe. And he did the chicken wings at the event. And they're the biggest chicken wings I ever saw. And he told me how we bred chicken in such a way where they have such small wings. But historically, they have really big wings. And it's like little details and nuances like that you learn. And it was people like that really shaped my book. Because even I joked to someone, every commodity is different. And I think the most complex commodity is actually milk. It's a very complex system. And, it's a regional program that's based on 1930s legislation that makes no sense because it was before we had refrigeration. But just talking to these dairymen that have done this whole their lives, they know everything. They know where their bodies are buried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, each farm is like a historical catalog of different programs, government, state, nonprofit foundation programs that have come through. And it is, like you said, you can see the potential of what it could be, but it seems like there's so many things mucking it up. And I know, now we're going to get into the hairy part of it all because it is a very, very hairy system. Our food and food supply system really is where a lot of policies, good and bad, show up very quickly and immediately. On a hopeful note, we have some of the best farmers in the world. And that's what I realized when I was helping get the film's Kiss the Ground out. And
I
executive produced that. I executive produced Common Ground, which has just come out as well. And my learnings, which leave me with hope and motivate me to just keep getting out there and standing up on behalf of the family farmer, is that these individuals are like my jaw's on the floor. They are so inspiring, these people. And I don't know that I could do the work half as good as Donegal Markegard here in Northern California, the Burroughs out in our Central Valley, Will Harris. I don't know that I could do, like, even if I spent my whole life trying to perfect it, these individuals are masters of their craft. And if we just got out of their way, if we just didn't make their lives so hard, like that to me is the thesis of a path towards like a true optimal farming system in the United States. So maybe we talk about how we get there. How do we get off the necks of the family farmers? I mean, you talk about the effect of consolidation. There's, these huge conglomerates and monopolies that come in, they destroy the farmland, blah, blah. We can talk about all of like it goes on and on and on. But, you know, what are kind of the ways in which you see the United States family farmer making a true comeback if people just got out of their way?
Let me just start by pulling back for a second and saying, you see this with Kiss the Ground. This is one of the most bipartisan things right now in America. I've just like really ingrained that by doing talking about this book for the last year is you have the most upper class, yuppie Democrats, right wing, rural, whatever. Everyone sees the system's not working. People are being gouged. And on top of it, the food doesn't taste good. That's a simple thing I've noticed, especially older Americans see, like what the inputs matter, especially meat and dairy. A cow on pasture is going to make such a better breast milk than a cow in a metal shed. How we got here to me is what I realized writing my grain baron chapter. So every baron, I have 7 barons I profile in the book, but every baron's really a structural story. I'm kind of like hiding the vegetable. Like I'm using these like punchy narratives to tell you a story. But my grain baron chapter is really about the Farm Bill and how the Farm Bill has really just been corrupted by Wall Street to overproduce grains at the expense of everything else. So if you grow carrots, you get nothing. You grow corn and soy, you're gonna get a ton of subsidies. And what it does is, first of all, the beauty of a family farm, it's like a diversified retirement portfolio. You have 6 or 7 crops going, so one creators, you're still fine because you have other ones. The system now pushes people to specialize in 1 or 2, which makes them very fragile. Like no one would put all their stock in one company. And so what you realize, though, is this system is designed for Pepsi to make chips and pop as cheap as possible and is not designed for the family farm. It's actually driving them into bankruptcy. And it's also why you need money to be healthy in this country. And it was studying that and writing that is when I realized is the system is not designed for anyone but just a few.
Yeah. We've on this show, we've talked a lot about how corn and soy is really designed to prop up and make the profit margins for the big food brands. And you mentioned Pepsi, there's a few of these very, very big, powerful food brands that rely on the high fructose corn syrup as inputs. And then, soy, vegetable oil, the seed oils, like they're looking for cheap inputs as well. And it is a massive system. I mean, the new farm bill is going to be the first farm bill that's over $1 trillion. Right? Isn't that wild? How involved are you in this current farm bill? I mean, I've looked at it. I'm like, it's a blueprint for how to keep America sick.
Yeah. No, this is one, if there's any idea I've talked about and workshopped the most last year, it's been this one. To be honest with you, about a year ago, I was at the point of we should junk it. I just think it's just too far gone to be saved.
Yeah.
Because right now, some people might know, some people might not. 75% of it is actually low-income food assistance, and only a quarter of it's for the farmer.
SNAP.
Yeah, SNAP. I thought about separating them. I've been workshopping that a little bit, but that tends to scare people, to be frank with you. I could tell reading audiences. What I'd rather do now is just take the Farm Bill, the actual farm programs, make it into one big pot for conservation, and let farmers decide what's best for their land. Because right now we're picking favorites. And I'd rather subsidize farm practices like grazing, cover crops, prairie strips, instead of subsidizing certain crops. Because right now you're interfering in the market, you're picking favorites, you're artificially making corn cheap. I'd rather pull back from that. So that's kind of where my thinking's involved. But I'm pretty in general, I just think we keep doing the same thing over and over. Every farm bill is a copy and paste of essentially the 1996 one.
It seems that putting money into growers is problematic in general. And here's why I think even putting money into conservation might be a red herring that we need to be careful about. Because prairie strips are great. I love them. In fact, I funded the Iowa State Prairie Strip program.
Huh.
And I got feedback, and some of the feedback was like, hey, some of these farmers, they were spraying dead some of their cropland because they were so desperate to access some of these funds, these prairie strip funds. So they would spray dead their cropland in order to clear in order to plant a prairie strip. And I was like, that's not how that should have been done. And so what I'm realizing, and it was a member of the Senate who's a Tea Party guy, longtime Tea Party guy. And he said to me, look, like anytime the government gets too big is when you get stupid policy. So anytime you have a $1 trillion farm bill, the output is going to be fundamentally bad. It's going to be bad. It's not going to achieve what you want it to achieve. It's going to hurt a lot of people. And it will probably work against what you're actually going for. Because if you pull back the whole thing, and this is where I think that the notion of definitely separating food assistance out from the farm bill, that makes tons of sense. The people that you claim are nervous, I think if you spend enough time explaining to them, first, they might be nervous because they might be receiving some of these funds in the sense of directing it or being like a third party agent in it. But if they're still nervous and just because they're like, well, is that just, there's too many unknowns? It is at a point now in which our country's budget is so deeply collapsed that we have to make these big moves. We have to take the risk towards going directionally, the place that we have to get. We have to start directionally going that way. Because if we don't, we won't have a functioning country or government anymore. I mean, the chronic disease rate due to how SNAP is being deployed, they're directly linked. It's like, the farm bill is basically, let's prop up cheap food, processed food, and then let's make sure tons of people have SNAP government dollars to purchase that cheap food because they live in food deserts.
Well, I would say the scary thing about food assistance to me now is you have the world's richest family, the Waltons, who are America's largest employer. Most of their employee base and customer base relies on that money. And so essentially you can work a full-time job and still require food assistance. Why are we giving this? It basically means it's a wage subsidy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, why are we giving a wage subsidy to the world's richest family? I totally agree with you there.
Yeah.
The whole time you're talking about the farm bill, what I kept thinking of, and it's where I want to research a lot, is New Zealand. I believe they pulled back on their subsidies in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But as you were also saying, where we go from here, it's kind of what I realized in life is like you kind of got to do like 10 things at once because they're all kind of interlocking. As we change the farm bill at the same time too, I actually want to use the procurement power of schools to help drive the new system because they just buy so much food. And so many farmers will tell me privately how much they don't like the farmer's market because it's not consistent, they get rained out. But, they know school's going to buy X amount of carrots every week. It's also good politics. And also most people are doing this. You see a lot of this already going on. How do we build on that? How do we keep our money locally? Because also local food just tastes better.
Mm-hmm.
Yada, yada, yada. Also, food's just going to change. You're going to probably eat bison in Montana, pork in Iowa, whatever in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
I want to build up that system because right now we're feeding our kids garbage. We all know that, Lunchables.
Lunchables were in the school lunch program.
Yeah, and it's a joke. And this isn't cooking. This is frozen food. Let's let people make a full-time living cooking food from the local farmers. What a radical concept. If anything I've learned too writing this book is what we have now is radical. So much of what we're talking about here and the people you highlight is actually very traditional. is just kind of like how much we've gone off course.
Yeah, it's radically stupid.
Yes.
It's,
I mean, that is like the story of the farm system. Like, going back to dairy, I literally, my favorite joke about the dairy industry I've heard is only 5 people understand it and 4 of them are dead.
yeah.
It's a program based in 1930s America before refrigeration, where there's 4 different types of subsidies and it's regional. So there's different dairy markets, incredibly complex. And it's like, guys, we have fridges now. We don't, let's update our dairy laws or our dairy system. This makes no sense.
No, our dairy laws were designed, I feel like right around the time of like huge sanitation issues. People were dying in cities due to sanitation problems. And we've just been on that track of the lowest common denominator of dairy quality. And we've lost because of, these food safety concerns. We keep losing the small dairy. I mean, California has lost, I think the last I heard they've lost like 60% of dairies in the last 50 years. And the consolidation is happening. And so then you have these dairies that are producing and then shipping off to be processed, pasteurized, mixed with other dairy milk from other farms, and the quality of what ends up on the grocery store shelf is so low. It's really actually kind of disgusting when you think about it. How like what goes into a single gallon of milk that you would get at Walmart or Safeway. I mean, it's kind of gross stuff. I mean, no wonder our kids can't digest it anymore.
Well, to me, I noticed the biggest thing with produce. So Driscoll's is my berry baron for people out there. They sell 1 in 3 berries, but they don't grow a single berry. And I really want to use that chapter to talk about what trade agreements have done to the food system. So like 40% of your fruit now and 40% of your vegetables and 60% of your fruit is coming from outside America now. And here's the thing.
Wait, can you restate those stats?
Yeah. It's 40% of your vegetables and 60% of your fruit
come from outside the United States.
Yes.
How did we get here?
It's the trade stuff. It's a race to the bottom for labor and environmental standards. So honestly, when supply chains get long, transparency collapses. So, LA Times did a famous series called Made in Mexico 10, 20 years ago, where you have children picking berries for children. First of all, that undermines farmers doing it right here. You cannot compete on price against a production model like that. 2, makes bad tasting food. And 3, Consumer Reports did a big thing last summer where, a lot of this organic produce from outside America, turns out they're using pesticides. Because those aren't the same regulatory standpoints. I mean, I know just because I'm in these weeds, if I see a organic product from Turkey, I generally don't trust it. But I mean, that's where we are. I mean, I think it's been underappreciated how bad it is in the produce industry.
Yeah, it's it actually I have stopped buying berries at the grocery store because I just don't trust what's sprayed on them, because they do require quite a bit of pest management, which means increased spraying. And even if it does have that organic label, like you say, you just don't know where it's grown, how it's handled, or what is allowed to be sprayed under that organic label. It's really problematic. So, you talk about all these barons. I was really hung up on your first chapter, the pork barons, because that's your hometown.
Yeah.
And so you grew up in Iowa. And you grew up in a beautiful agriculture community. You talk about the rolling hills, and you talk about seeing all the cows, walking around, and everything just felt clean, and you could swim in the lakes in your neighborhood. And then over time, that's all disappeared because these massive confinement operations came in. I couldn't believe some of the stories and some of the things you document in that chapter. It was, I had to actually take a pause from the book because it was actually just so, it made me sick to my stomach.
That one is, so that's the chapter that started this whole project. It was being in a dive bar in Iowa in 2018, hearing the most powerful political person in Iowa was a hog farmer who does 5 million hogs a year, has a private jet.
5 million?
Yes. And has a private jet with the words allegedly when pigs fly on it.
Wow.
Because in my head, first of all, that's such a powerful symbol. But it was also that chapter of me grappling with what happened to Iowa in my lifetime. I mean, I've lived the American dream. You know, I'm a first generation college student. It was a great place to grow up. My parents in the 90s, my mom cut hair, my dad drove a truck, and they built a new home. You know, went on vacation, and I just kind of saw it all fall apart. I mean, you play games as a kid, driving, you see cows in land, you know, count the cows, and you drive Iowa now, you smell animals, but you don't see them. And it was understanding this. That whole chapter to me is about regulatory capture. But also, when I first wrote it, I was really angry. But now I kept editing it because I kind of view this book took me 5 years. And I kind of view writing as almost like a crock pot. You have to think on it, walk away from it, come back to it, simmer in it. My parents keep a camp up in Northeast Iowa, and I worked on this book a lot there. And I just got sad. Like I read that chapter now, it's profoundly sad. It's like Iowa should be the Tuscany of North America, some of the best soil in the world.
I didn't realize how unique the soil in Iowa was.
Yeah, and like I mean, it's even like my favorite thing in the summer is a BLT, good Iowa bacon, like a good Iowa tomato. It's just you can't beat that. But then, you know, Iowa now has the second highest cancer rate in America.
Mm-hmm.
60 to 70% of the waterways in Iowa are too polluted now to go in. And it's one of the most obese states. Like to me, Iowa is the canary in the coal mine. Like a lot of America think of Iowa's field of dreams, and that's just not the reality anymore. And this one's hard to talk about, even in Iowa, because people know this story. I mean, they lived it. A lot of people have kind of like a Stockholm syndrome. They fought power and they lost. These confinements, if they go up, you can't stop it locally in Iowa. If they go up, your home value collapses. It smells awful. It's awful work. Imagine being your own boss, your own independent family farmer, and then now you go work for one of these barons and you're basically paid low wages to haul out dead pig bodies because like 10% of pigs die inside. The animals aren't happy. And like, just on a different note, to me, I think dairy farmers have the most intimate relationship with their animal. They're kind of like a dog. You go to any dairy farm, like they'll tell you the pedigree, the personality.
Oh yeah.
It's a sense of responsibility like a farmer has that's lost in this model. You know, when you
because a heifer, I mean, like a heifer can't produce milk unless she's feeling good.
Yeah.
And the better, you know, female mother cow feels, the more milk she produces, and that's directly tied to the income and finances of the farmer. So they have to be in tune. But hog farming is not like that.
Nope. And that's the scary thing is like they can shove them into a metal shed. I mean, these pigs are. Let me be careful. I did hear something in Ames, Iowa. I was speaking to someone who used to be a butcher. Mm-hmm. And actually the trauma, I want to be very careful here because I'm not a scientist. Like this is outside my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. There is some scholarship, and it's kind of one of these things I want to kind of spend the spring researching more, but the trauma that hogs feel inside does something to their bodies. So when they actually butcher the carcasses, there's some kind of acid that gets released. Like it does impact the taste and it does impact what we eat. Here's the thing. I think anyone kind of think of it. Imagine I put you in a metal shed all day. It's going to do something to you too. Like it's not hard. I don't need a PhD to know that, but it's undoubtedly impacting the quality of the meat.
Mm-hmm. I won't eat it.
Yeah, I don't eat it. That's like the one. My rule of thumb is
I do eat bacon, but from Donegal Markegard here, and trust me, those cows are happy.
Yes.
The sows are happy. They compost, and this is having now seen a good hog operation, and then reading that chapter in your book and realizing how far away from a good hog operation it's the Hansen family. Henson.
Yep, Jeff and Deb Hansen.
Yeah, that they're running out in Iowa. I mean, there should be no waste flowing out into the waterways. If you do proper management of the hog pasture, it doesn't need that much space. I mean, you need a decent amount of space, but you could get, you know, one sow with like 10 piglets. You know, she rotates through them. I think gestation is 3 or 4 months. And then they wait until the the baby hogs are about, is it 9 or 10 months old before they head out to be processed. But in a good operation, you don't actually even need to muck it out. You just actually bring in to the pen shavings. Like you can
Yeah.
bring in wood chips, shaved hay, and you mix it all in, and it actually composts into their bedding under them. And it smells a little bit, but it doesn't smell that bad. And it certainly doesn't waft out like 10, 20 feet. It just kind of smells, in the, I would say within like 10 feet, you can pick it up. It is hard on the land. There's no doubt about that. But in a good operation, it doesn't really seep out into the watershed. It can actually compost right underneath. You can definitely manage some of the watershed if it's on a slope. You can plant into it. It's kind of like a leach field. But yeah, I think, these individuals aren't producing 5 million hogs a year, but I will say the quality of the meat is exceptional, and I can taste it. I can feel it. Like I can actually digest it completely differently. But yeah,
No, I'm laughing because I should mention this earlier. I did tastings when I wrote this book, and I did with milk. So I had people drink pasture milk, industrial milk, and my dairy baron is Fairlife. And it's pasture wins. It's just a richer, more beautiful flavor. And then bacon, just hold the pieces of bacon up.
yeah,
You just see it's much more redder. It's more, you fry confinement bacon. It's just pure fat.
yeah,
And to your point on the hog example, what I was reminding me of this, I was asking an old farmer in Iowa this summer why all the silos in Iowa are like falling apart or they're gone. And she was explaining to me, part of being a hog farmer was, you had those 6 crops. So you just kind of feed the hog what you had, like you grew your own feed.
hmm,
What this model does now is you grow corn, you sell it to a conglomerate who then sells it to the other hog person. So you're not even like, first of all, it makes you very fragile as a business. And you're seeing this play out right now in real time. But I mean, so much of that family farm was just knowing how to like manage your own operation, and like also the pride you have in doing that. Like that is, I can't say that enough. That is so much that's been lost in the modern American food system. It's stripping people of their pride and dignity. And that's a point I really tried to make in my coffee baron chapter, because my mom used to run a coffee shop in Iowa, and like there's no coffee native to Iowa. Like it's all kind of the same. People came to my mom's coffee store because of the pride she took in her business. And like
yeah,
she worked right next to a General Mills plant. People would work third shift, come over because they knew they had that intimate relationship. And like we'd go to their funerals or weddings. Like this is, and then my mom worked at a Starbucks after we sold it. And they didn't even trust her as a worker to know how to merchandise her own store. Like they got a planogram where they were told to put everything on the shelf.
yeah.
And I think that's so much why people are so angry right now too, is that lack of dignity in the work.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about a 2-class system, it's, if you have means, one of the first things you do is you improve what you eat. You go to a nicer restaurant, because what makes for a nice restaurant is nice quality ingredients. You are shopping at different grocery stores. I mean, it's just, and I say this because I grew up on government assistance at times, and you'd have to figure out my mom would have to figure out how to feed us for $15, $20 a day. And she cared a lot about the quality of the ingredients. And it just, you move through the world of food according to your economic posture. And what our food system is doing is it's built for just, it's built for a large population of people who are probably slipping from the middle class into a lower stature. And my concern is that the more that we feed that system, because the system in itself is designed to make, like, it all pairs, right? You have a few food barons, and then everybody else in the middle gets wiped out, right? And then how that works is those few food barons feed the masses who are slipping from the middle class into a lower stature. And so I really think that if you, and it's hard to model this economically, but it's almost as if one is creating the conditions for the other, right? The broken food systems, which are very, you know, it's less than 1% of growers are making 90% or more of the income. We have now this, it locks the rest of America to actually feed that system, right? So they go hand in hand. And so if you fix the food system, my guess is you fix our economy as well. And you talk about that in your introduction, how such a large population of Americans work in our food system, and a smaller and smaller percent of those are actual farmers.
Yes, that is. Let me back up and just say my measurement of success is improving the meat quality at Dollar General. I think for too long it's been like it's been kind of the let's make better food options for the elite America at Whole Foods. Everyone's entitled. First of all, by the way, what we're talking about making good bacon, that's why bacon was made in America when I was born.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sick of this have-notness. Everyone's entitled to good bacon.
Yeah.
By the way, like my home Good Housekeeping did this. This is maybe 5-10 years ago. Adjusted for inflation, bacon was the same price under Truman as under Obama. Because industry will always lead with cost. Oh, the system makes cheaper food. And we don't even look at the health stuff. We look at per dollar. This is based on USDA 2021 data before this whole inflation took hold. Americans spend more money on food at the store than people in like Germany, United Kingdom, Canada. More about dollar for Italy. And anyone that's been in Italy knows what a dollar gets you there is very different than here, which we shouldn't be shocked. Concentrated markets gouge is what they do. We're paying more for garbage, essentially. But just to your point, to the farmer to the left, that's why I'm a big believer. You have so many people doing it right, but they're running uphill. And like my slaughtering baron is this Brazilian company, JBS. I really do think, and it might sound over the top to say, but they're the closest thing we have to a criminal organization in America. I mean, they pled guilty to bribing their way to monopoly level status. Like not even campaign contributions. I'm talking like they gave a Manhattan apartment to a politician.
Wow.
Anyone that's trying to do something different, they are going to undermine you. So part of allowing this new system to emerge, to innovate, to create this beautiful new thing is we got to rein in the bad actors. And that's why I'm such a big fan of the old-fashioned Teddy Roosevelt style trust busting. Because, I mean, you have my favorite little stat here is McDonald's just announced this past fall it's suing the beef packers. And unbeknownst to most people, McDonald's is the largest buyer of beef in the world. You would think you would treat your best customer, you know what I mean, your number one customer, the best way possible. And the fact that McDonald's is even accusing them of price gouging tells you where we are.
Why isn't the SEC going after the food barons?
It's such that's kind of what I realized writing this book is they're just, I mean, even Nicole, that is so much of this is out in the open. It's a lack of political courage. I think it's just as simple as that. We know, like, we're not talking AI, we're talking hogs. We know the playbook here. We see this behavior is we've had political appointees of both parties lacking the political courage to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the life of me, to me, when I read the slaughter baron chapter, my anger is actually at Secretary Tom Vilsack, because these are just, to me, the barons are just children who've never been punished, so they keep pushing the envelope. This is one of the most bipartisan things in the last 4 years to do. You have children working in the slaughterhouses being abused.
Yeah.
You have people being gouged, farmers screaming for help, ranchers screaming for help. And not only did he not do anything, he wasted $1 billion of taxpayers and new startups that I wish them the best, but good luck getting market access against these entities. On top of it, all the big players made acquisitions these last 4 years and got bigger.
Yeah. Who would bring an antitrust investigation? Like who has the political wherewithal to start it, to request it?
Devil's in the details, it always is. So in every industry except meat, it's the Federal Trade Commission. The USDA has a carve out in meat packing. You see a lot of bipartisan work right now at the Federal Trade Commission during in big tech, but Vilsack had oversight of the meat, so the meat would have to come from USDA. That said, nothing scares an agency more in DC than threatening to cut their budget. are taking away their authority, I think we should take away that authority from USDA and give it to the Federal Trade Commission because they have proven that they're incompetent at this job.
Interesting. You mentioned Tom Vilsack. I'm not a fan of him. I really think that it is just wild to me that so many administrations of the past in our lifetime have just kept kicking this problem down the road and just line up a spineless leader to take on what I think is amongst one of our most important agencies, the USDA. And, I had the opportunity this round we almost, to be very close to the selection process for the new Secretary of Agriculture. And I saw what happened kind of behind the scenes. And, there is, I don't know if it's lack of political courage or just a insincerity around how big of a problem we have.
Yeah. There's
Lack of recognition that this is a really big problem. And therefore, it's not something I'm going to really create a platform out of.
That's just to build on that point. I saw that in Iowa writing my Hog Baron chapter. It's I was able to write that chapter because the Des Moines Register used to be a phenomenal newspaper. They had a whole team of agriculture reporters. That's gone. A lot of local news in Iowa is dead. And what's happened is a lot of the news now, especially in agriculture, is paid for by the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like getting your living in West Virginia in the 19th century and the coal industry is telling you what's going on. They're shaping the wants and desires. And on top of it, a lot of the newspapers they're on the coast and they just care what's the fancy new vegan restaurant. They're not talking about this stuff or looking here. I mean, to me, the best example of this is in my Dairy Baron, I talk about how I uncovered a worker died. He got sucked into this manure digester, which is just kind of a BS climate change thing. And here's the thing. This is one of the largest tourist attractions in the state of Indiana. This was public records. I didn't do FOIA. This wasn't like someone leaking this to me. It was me going through the records and realizing that one of the largest tourist attractions in the state, a man died who had 3 children. And this was never reported. And it's just, it's lack of political courage, but it's also, I just don't think you're not seeing, people don't realize how bad the crisis is. Let me put it that way. I think if you want to talk about rays of hope, the cancer stuff in Iowa is actually getting a lot of attention. Everyone knows someone who's died of cancer. They see it, they taste it, they see what's happening in their community. At the same time, too, we're going to have a moment of reckoning coming up because ethanol is going to die. Cars, EVs, hybrids, whatever. I personally think, and this is usually what gets me in the hottest water, to be honest with you, I think ethanol has actually been really detrimental to the Midwest because it pushed a lot of cattle off the land. Cattle ranchers can't compete on price against corn. And if we're being really frank, most grain production will be robotics in the future, and that's not a bad thing. But there's only so many cows on pasture one person can look after. So that's what I want to do is phase out corn, put animals back on the land. Because I think that's the single best thing we can do for rural America is do that, restore the family farm. Because it's going to make a better product, it's better for the environment. It's just such a simple aha. Because by the way, this is such a random thing, but people love Kerrygold. It's like this Irish butter.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay, but that's just the way we used
We
to do
make
butter.
better butter here, though.
We do, but that's just the fact that's just butter. My mom that's butter from 30 years ago. It's not the fact that this is a yuppie premium whatever. You're that shows you how far we've gone.
I love raw butter personally. It's so delicious.
I've never had it.
Oh gosh, where are you based now?
Cedar Rapids.
Cedar Rapids. Okay. I mean, just I'm sure you can find some raw butter at your local farmer's market. It is incredible. And my fiance, who was severely dairy intolerant, it would make him so sick even if there was a little cross contamination. He can now eat raw butter. He can have raw cheese. He can have raw milk, and he can digest it all. And it's It's changed his life. I mean, watching someone who loves cheeseburgers but hasn't been able to eat one for 15 years eat a cheeseburger is like one of the most wonderful things because it's just this joy.
I'm smiling because my husband's Jewish and he jokes he has Jewish stomach, and he thought he couldn't do milk. And then once he had pasture milk, he's like, we drink an insane amount of milk. I think he drinks more milk than me. And like, I'm a boy from Iowa.
Yeah.
But I say that because keep in mind what this does to the farmers is when Americans get used to low quality products, they turn away from the category.
Yeah.
Even something simple as a melon, like most melons in the grocery store, in my personal opinion, just like cantaloupe has no taste, but you actually have a good cantaloupe. It's like, oh dear God, melons can be good. And so that's the thing to keep in mind is these models are driving people to that processed food because it's making a bad product. So they then think they can't consume that product without realizing they just don't know what a good product is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they're harder and harder to find. Like you have to really hunt for it. Even my nicest grocery store in town runs out of the raw milk because the demand for it is so much higher than the supply. Even in, even in the bread basket of America here in California, like we're running out of the good produce because there's just not enough producers.
Yeah.
And it's the most bizarre feeling of going to a grocery store that's packed full of like all these different brands and all these different milks. You got the 2% and the whole, and blah, blah, blah. But this tiny sliver is for the raw pasture raised organic milk and it's empty. And you look through the hole and you try to yell back at someone and you say, hello, is there any more back there? And they're like, no, sorry, we won't stock for, until next Tuesday. And you're like, shoot, it's only Wednesday. So you sold out in a day.
And are you in the northern part of California?
Yeah.
You have some of the best dairy. I mean, Sonoma makes incredible dairy. I mean, some of my favorite cheese comes out of that region. It makes sense, though. I mean, going back to stupid, you have so much dairy being done in Mexico. That doesn't make sense. Like, you don't get the water there. There's not the pasture there. Like, there's a reason why dairy is in Sonoma. There's a reason why it's in Wisconsin, upstate New York, Vermont. Because it's like, cows need a lot of rain. They need a lot of pasture. They eat a lot of grass. And like, they're in like, I don't know. I just think about that a lot. Because it's just these production models, these regions make no sense anymore.
So what's the process of scrapping the farm bill? Because I'm at the point where I've looked at it now every which way, and I think you're right. I don't think that this is something that's worth trying to reform. I think it's too far gone. If we want to move the government food assistance program to a new program, it's possible. Who do you even go to start that process? Like, I feel like the farm bill is such a mystery bill that goes through so many people's hands by the time it like falls on the desk of Congress.
I think it's happening in front of us though right now. You have industry, they cannot, for the life of them, they've been trying to ram through a copy and paste bill for the last year, and they just can't do it. I mean, that was Senator Stabenow, Michigan's goal before she left. That was going to be her legacy, and she couldn't get it done because you have it breaking down in front of you. And I mean, that's actually when I realized the power of the Maha movement, to be honest with you, this summer, is I saw that movement breaking it down because members of the Republican House coalition were pulling out. Because it's, oh man, just when you were talking about the milk case, I was sitting there thinking, my favorite chapter is the grocery chapter in the book because I love grocery stores.
Me too.
And like, I love talking to grocery people because it's like,
Love them.
if you want to talk about like raw capitalism, like what you put in your cart, everything is fighting for your cart shelf. And I don't think people realize how much Americans, what we're eating has changed, especially with young men. Protein, like cottage cheese sales have been taken off, which I love cottage cheese. That's like a very Iowa Midwest thing. But the fact that cottage cheese is like becoming like a cool new thing tells you something's going on. You see a lot of people caring about like the meat quality, pasture meat. A lot of the ranchers are been really vocal about getting this out. But I'm saying all this because there's this growing young movement of, I would say, skews male, but younger men, conservative men who care about food quality, who didn't want this copy and paste Wall Street farm bill. And I think the success of that and like these other different kind of fractions all kind of coming together is what's kind of killing the modern Wall Street farm bill coalition. I think, Nicole, I don't know how this story is going to play out. I mean, I am I don't think it's been appreciated how much it's breaking down in front of us, though, because they don't want you to know it's breaking down. You talk to people on the Hill and the Farm Bill, it blows their mind that they cannot ram this thing through because they are throwing everything they can at it.
Yeah. Well, think about like how much money these companies spend on branding and advertising. And here comes the Maha movement, who's like, that shit's bad for you. That's really bad for you. That's going to make you infertile. Like, and then all the parents are hearing this information. They're like, wait, this is going to make my child sick and underperform at school and increases like behavioral issues. So the Maha movement comes along and is completely upending the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that are going into brand advertising every year. And we're not really like, we're just out here trying to figure it out, and we're sharing information, and now we have free speech back. So it's really fun, and we're able to connect, and, it's taken off. Like we have become like the selectors and brand marketers for our generation. And just like those conservative young men who are trying to like bulk up and eat cleaner protein, like they want to feel virile, you got to eat clean foods to do that. They're the ones leading the brand marketing for this health movement. And so like, if you think about just the economics of what Maha has introduced, it's almost like it should be a chapter in Freakonomics. Like,
Well, that's why.
how to take down the farm bill. But I do think in some, this is weakening everyone's ability to do things as they have been done over many generations. I mean, farm bills every few years, there's a new one that comes up. And this is the problem with combining it with the SNAP program, is that now the farm bill is beholden to new standards, right? New marketing standards on what people are eating and seeing and feeling and choosing to bring home.
When you were saying that, it reminded me of, when we tell history, we tend to truncate it. Like everyone thinks about Teddy Roosevelt and the meat packers, but that really started with Iowa farmers. The first anti-monopoly laws in the world came from Iowa farmers mad at grain elevators. So they passed a law, a few states did it, then they did it nationally, and guess what? A few presidents, they didn't do anything. It took a man with courage to do the right thing. And I say that because who knows, like history, we'll see these results. DC is always the last place to know.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see these, we'll know in retrospect what happened, but I just know personally, I went on Glenn Beck's network this summer for an hour. It was honestly one of my best interviews. And it was there when I realized there's such a weird coalition coming together right now in America on this stuff. I can't say that enough. It is, you have Elizabeth Warren working with Josh Hawley on meatpacking. You have Mike Lee working with Cory Booker on checkoff reforms. That's when things get done in America. It's when weird bedfellows get together. And like so part of my goal of this book is I try to edit out all the polemicism. I just want to put these stats out there, let you decide what you think. But my goal is to make the 10 as big as possible so something can get done. I don't think anything gets done by saying people are wrong or they're right, because you're not always going to agree with your bedfellows, but you got to get, when Josh Hawley and Elizabeth Warren get together, you can get something done, because it's like this, it's so, you know what I mean? Like this is so ridiculous. And it's just so, I don't know. That's what I want to focus my attention on, is how to, because in the day, I was broken. And the barons win when the status quo holds. How do I shake it up? How do I get you to care and get different people to care so we can do something about it?
Mm-hmm. Have there been any successful lawsuits against the Hansons in Iowa for the pollution they're responsible for?
Oh God, no. There was a water lawsuit. So Des Moines sued, not against the Hansons, against certain rural communities for not, because there's a water, like Des Moines had to spend millions of dollars because the water was so polluted for its own people. That lawsuit didn't end up panning out. I will say though, I did one book event in their hometown, Iowa Falls, in the spring last year. It was the one time I got scared. I joked to my husband, if I show up on Manure Lagoon the next day, you know what?
Oh gosh, that's not a good way to go.
I know. I mean, it's honestly, well, let's not go
Ugh.
down that wormhole. But that does happen, by the way, because of the fumes that go off from these. You'll see these buildings put off so much toxic fumes. Every 6 months or a year in the Midwest, you'll see a story where the door shuts on someone, and what usually happens is the fumes knock you out, and you fall into the lagoon and drown to death. Um,
Holy smokes, that's
but I did it in
disgusting.
my hometown, and I had 50 people show up in a town like 5,000, 7,000 people, which you're lucky in New York City if 50 people show up at a book talk. And I kid you not, Nicole, more than half stayed behind afterwards to talk to me. And no one was mean or aggressive. It was people just really sad of like, they saw the empire building. They saw the lies. They saw the false promises. They promised all this, and guess what? They didn't do it. And then they moved to Des Moines. Like Des Moines is the uppy city in Iowa. So they, packed up and left. So they don't even live among their destruction, but these people do. And it's a beautiful town. I mean, it's seen better days, but it's on the bluffs. I just always go back to the notion of I think most Americans are good people. It's just the greedy of a few holding us back from making real reform.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny talking about like how bipartisan this issue is. It really is. And someone asked me the other day, they're like, Nicole, if you run for governor, what are you going to run as? And I was like, I mean, at this point, I'll run as a leprechaun to fix some of these issues because it doesn't really matter my party affiliation is meaningless when you have a system. And California really, I think, is like ground zero for many of these fights because we produce so much in this state. We're the top producer of vegetables. We produce an enormous amount of dairy. If we fail here in California, there is no hope for any other state in the United States to overcome these horrible policies. So we have to overcome it here in this state first. Maybe not first, but we must accomplish this. And so it doesn't like I really don't care to run as any party affiliation. I think the most important thing is that we bring people together. We don't alienate anyone as we seek solutions, as we give power to the voices of these individuals. Like you're talking about all those folks that met you in Des Moines during your book tour. I mean, that has been the most vocal population of individuals that have immediate needs from the government. And no one's listening. Hardly anybody's listening to them right now. What's your take on what's going on in Europe? I've seen some extraordinary pictures and videos of farmers coming out in their huge tractors, lining up and protesting in city streets, at capitals. What's happening over there?
Before I touch that, just to your point in California,
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in proof of concepts. Like
Mm.
to the point that DC will be the last to learn. Sometimes you just got to have a state got to do it right. And then guess what? Let the other 49 states copy and paste that. But you got to have proof of concepts. And even locally, just work to make your school have better food and brag about it so people can see. Because guess what? Every politician will then show up and take that photo op of kids eating a good meal.
Hmm.
I just want to say that because I feel like hope right now is people crave and they want to see success. Because you got to have heroes who take on the barons. As for Europe, I actually don't know much about, and that's something I'm kind of toying with the second book, and that's something I want to like explore more because I realize like I want to study the Irish butter system more. I've seen some of those protests, but I don't know much, Nicole. I'm hesitant when I see it reported out in certain agricultural news outlets. I don't quite trust them because I see how much flaunting cover they give my hog barons that I'm not sure the underlying things. And so I'm a big believer in I just want to go and talk to people. I
Hmm.
just want to show up in Italy, show up in France, wherever, and spend some time talking because it's sometimes people on the ground just know more than what the narrative is being told.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of the things I heard about in Europe had you know, Ukraine created direct implications for the European farmers that were kind of forced out of markets because Ukrainian products were flooding other European markets. But then I looked at the numbers and I was like, yeah, there's probably there's definitely some truth to that. But there's something else going on. And then I saw water There's a lot of water mismanagement happening as well. And I've seen that here in California, these disastrous water management policies. Um, and the other thing that seems to be happening is that like there's these fake food, fake meat, fake produce groups that are coming in, and they're getting a lot of the government attention and government grants. And I saw that happen here in the United States too, when under the Biden administration, they hosted a White House conference on nutrition. And the whole thing was hijacked by like fake food producers. And I call it fake food, but a lot of it's like lab produced meat. And some of it is, environmentally sustainable, like, fake fish, right? That
Yeah.
was another one, was that they were producing fish in labs. And then indoor grown vegetables with hydroponics and robots. Um, because growing food on our 900 million acres of farmland in the United States is somehow bad for the environment.
But what's funny about it, even a lot of those examples is like the fake meat thing. I mean, the market spoke. That category collapsed. I mean, you talk to any grocery place, those sales people, I did it. You buy it once, try it, and you're like, why would I? Why would I buy it again? The sales just a lot of them are grocery stores are shrinking that shelf space because it just never took. People just didn't like the product. But I will say what got me thinking about that conversation is I'm kind of in general a big believer in just focusing on national sovereignty. I really do believe every country should just be self-sufficient, and it really concerns me the extent of how not only the foreign ownership in the American food system. Like most of the meat packers aren't American companies. The ones gouging farmers, gouging at the store, but like even this production model, like in Iowa, we do 25 million hogs. Those things do the manure of a hog does 3 times more manure than a human. So that's manure of 75 million people. Our pork consumption as Americans is flat. So we're producing more pigs, and that's for export. And that's mainly to feed Asian countries like China. So why are we destroying rural Iowa to feed China? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm very much of, well, maybe let's do less industrial. Like, let's just, I don't know. I'm like, that is something I can see people get squeamish when I say the phrase national sovereignty, but I just think,
Well, I mean, people on the left get squeamish about it, but I would say like the majority of Americans who voted for Trump this past November, America First is his biggest platform. It's his platform.
true, but look at Terry Branstad, though. He was President Biden's Chinese ambassador, former governor of Iowa. I mean, there's no party more tied into China than the Republican Party of Iowa. Terry Branstad's son was a Trump lobbyist and then ran the campaign between administrations. So it's weird here. But you're right. But I think what you said there, though, is the rhetoric hits with people. People get it. And the question is just the politicians having the courage to actually like to do something here, because I can't say this enough. Why, like the once I realized we're destroying rural Iowa to feed China, it's just like, why? Is it worth it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. I mean, look, we have an America First president right now. He claims he spent a lot of time on the campaign trail talking up farmers and protecting American farmers and farmland and American sovereignty. What do you think about his USDA pick, Brooke Rollins?
I knew that's what the question was going. I think it's the most disappointing. Well, there's other agencies I don't really know much about. I think it's in my world, it's such a disappointment, such a missed opportunity. And then what I care about is, because when you elect the president, you're really electing thousands of local appointees. When I'm seeing what he's staffing USDA with, it's just constant, same old, same old, same old, same old. Even like the meat regulator, it's just someone from the last go around who didn't do anything, who was just in the pocket of industry. So I don't know.
How is it that the USDA somehow is like, it's always in the dark? It's always the one that like, it's always the one that somehow seems to get by, right? No one's really No one's like really picking on Trump for this. The farmers are just like rolling their, they're rolling their eyes. They're just like, what'd you expect? It's always like this. We're always the last in America to get the attention of the president. And we're always the ones that people are like use for their campaign materials. And we're the last ones to see any real change.
I think number one, most farmers have just heard hollow words their whole life. They don't trust a politician. Every politician has said, we're going to do something about meatpacking. I generally get the sense until you put points on the board, they don't believe you, which that's a logical thing to do here. But I will say to USDA, I mean, I really do think Vilsack is one that played a large part on why Harris lost. People, especially older Americans, they know their meat and dairy prices. And Vilsack's failure to rein in the price gouging at the stores really did impact the election. And it was, it was just so clear. You know what I mean? It's just so clear that gouging was going on, and it was going on for years. And it's clear that contributed to her. There's a lot. I'm not a political pundit. There's a lot of things to do, but you cannot deny that failure of Tom Vilsack contributed to Vice President Harris's loss. And that's something the Trump administration has to be very careful of you put the fox back in the hen house, they can undermine you. They can undermine what you're trying to do and other things. And that is, you can't point the same people and expect a different result.
Yeah, they're currently the price of eggs has just skyrocketed in the United States, and the left is already pointing fingers at Trump, but that's a legacy of Tom Vilsack's USDA is the price of produce is going through the roof, and I don't actually think that that's necessarily price gouging. I think it's that the egg situation is they've culled so many chickens. I don't know what number are we at now of cold chickens and hens?
Here's the thing about the thing that scares me. It's how normalized this is going to become. It turns out if you put tons of genetically similar animals in a metal shed, you're going to breed disease. Like, that's just what happens. Like, you know what I mean? It's logical. And so it's like, this is what happens with the bird stuff. And then honestly, the scary thing for me is pork, because in China, they're building they have built these 10-story hog confinements. And there's been reports in Reuters where they actually lock the workers indoors because they know the chance of disease outbreak is so high here. And it's just, you're playing Russian roulette here. And it's, again, it goes back to stupid. Like, it's such short-term thinking that's going to cost so much long-term. I generally don't think the egg stuff is price gouging. I tend to think it's the bird flu, the culling, like you said. But it will continue. This problem will only get worse because it's a reality of this production model.
It doesn't sound like we have the political will right now to change any of that. And
you have to be public about calling it out. That's actually really powerful of shaming. I'm my old-fashioned Catholicism showing. You just got to shame people. You got to make them scream. You got to let people know the reason why you're being gouged here is this. Because it's like USDA, no one's going to give you a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Never forget that. That is something I've internalized. Like, that's honestly half the reason why I wrote this book is I don't like what happened in Iowa. And I don't like what's being articulated in the politics. So let me just do this. The fact that you're elevating my book is huge. We're talking about it today is huge. And it's getting people to talk this way, because guess what? They don't want you to know about these empires and that what's going on here. But it's something, what I love about this framework is it's so cartoonish. It just feels morally wrong. It's and also I'm hearkening back to something we've done before. Like, the fact that my dairy baron claims residency at the Ritz-Carlton in Puerto Rico tells you everything. Like, that just doesn't feel right.
Yeah. What are they doing? Living out there like that while, the communities are suffering on the mainland. It just doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem at all America first.
But this doesn't happen overnight. Like, I opened my book with Julie Dunn. She's a retired woman in Eldora, Iowa. She's retired secretary. She spends her retirement fighting my hog parent. She told me straight up, most of the time she loses, but she'll stop one here and there. But she's like, you know what? I'm doing this for my granddaughter, because we didn't get here overnight. And it's going to take us, the positive vision we articulate, let's be really honest, it's going to take us decades to get there. But you have to articulate that vision, number one, because you have to know where you're going so you can steer a ship. But you also have to inspire people so they can get outside the malaise, so they can see a different system. Because right now, for most of my life, people haven't articulated that positive vision. The unsaid thing was move to the city, leave rural America, eat bad, you know what I mean? Like eat bad food. You know what I mean? Like it's seeing what the system could be. That's what you got to do because that's how you overcome giants.
Yeah, you have to have a vision for what it could be. And I see it. The will is there, the desire of young people to go into local food production is 100% there. So what are some of the programs you've seen that are exciting? Like what gives you enthusiasm
Yeah.
of bringing local production back?
Schools. I think I've seen the coolest thing that schools are doing. I mean, I've seen schools serve bison from local farmers. There's one Storm Lake, Iowa is the one I know top of my mind. It's a slaughter packing town, has 2 slaughterhouses, a turkey and a pork. And the way slaughterhouse towns tend to work is each one has like a different immigrant group. This one has a lot of Southeast Asians. So a lot of what the workers do is they have little farm plots on the side. The school buys the food, serves the food, and also teaches the other kids about the different cultures. Like that to me is the best of America. Also, the people who do that job love it because they're actually cooking food. And also, you get to play around. You're like, I remember there was a story I read where one farmer decided to grow, I'm going to butcher this.
Asahi?
Asahi, there you go, sorry.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? They played around and like, they did different dishes. And also like, first of all, that's the type of news people want to read. They want to see their fellow citizens doing good and having fun and having a good life. And that's what gives me the most hope right now is seeing that because it's actually going on more than people realize. But right now, the system, you have to run uphill to do that because of contracts and all that. You have to buy the lowest. Yes, all that. So how can
there's a land grab here in California? Like ranchers now, they get booted off of land that they've leased for generations from the federal government, only to then get a less favorable lease with more constraints. Ranching on conservation nonprofit land, like these conservation groups that are now buying up all of this farmland and putting restrictions on it is driving up the cost of operating and doing business. It's just so hard right now to run a family operation in the state of California. And then you have the Department of Water Resources saying they're going to cut water down to 40% of farmland here. That's going to retire 40% of our farmland. That's a big problem.
That's why I tell people, I think the more local politics are, the better the politician is usually. And they're the ones that they're the ones who read your email. Reach out, let that local state legislator, state senator know. And even like if you're trying to do something and you hit this regulation, if you don't say something, no one will. That's really been ingrained in me. Like no think tank in DC, trust me, they're not articulating that. You got to do that. And also like, don't be afraid to, if you find a journalist you like and you see something that's wrong, let them know. One little example is, that I'll never forget is, that movie Fargo? Remember the mulch scene at the end?
Oh yeah. No, I think I blocked that out.
So yeah. Sorry. It's a little gruesome, but a confinement owner. So about 10% of pigs die inside these metal sheds. And so there's always a dumpster next to them. And so this confinement owner was just throwing them into a mulch and throwing them on the field. That's illegal. An older lady in Iowa saw that and was like, what the heck? Reported it to the state agency. They didn't do anything. Do you know what she did? She called local news. And guess what? It blew up. And finally, the state did something and the person stopped that practice. And I say that because it's just, you got to let people know. I mean, I'm pretty frank about this one. Like Tom Vilsack's son works for this BS. He's a head lawyer for this BS ethanol pipeline company. And he left the most elite law firm in Iowa to go work for this. And I let a reporter know that because a friend of mine saw it on LinkedIn. And it's like, this whole business model is predicated on his daddy delivering. And it's that type of corruption that really bothers people. But it was just me sending a simple email to a reporter who can then tell that story. But now we know. And that's what you can do locally. That's what I really encourage people is you can be mad at DC, you can be mad at the administration, but you got to pressure. You're going up against some of the most powerful entities and some of the most ruthless entities. Like never forget that.
You make a really good point. And I think a lot of people feel burned from trying to do this in the past. I mean, I know I took stuff to like Chuck Schumer on regenerative agriculture. And I was like, why are we doing anything under the name of climate when we're ignoring this massive opportunity with our agricultural lands, right? It makes you look very disingenuous across your climate change portfolio to ignore the opportunity we have with our soil and our soil systems. And so you take all this, you make movies. I mean, look, like my journey has been so infuriating because I have tried to up level this stuff and I've had resources to do it. And, even today I'm seeking out the top lawyers in the United States and the top litigators to represent family farmers that are being wronged. And it just feels like such a lonely battle to go up against such a big behemoth, and to continue to just watch the suffering and the bad policies snowball and snowball. I mean, watching the farm bill snowball and snowball into this like unwieldy, disastrous, unstoppable force.
Yeah. But you don't, here's one little thing. First of all, thank you for doing Kiss the Ground. I didn't know that before this until you mentioned it. That has been one of the most impactful things. It comes up to me. Everyone watches Netflix.
Yeah.
It comes up to me when I talk. People are like, have you seen this movie? And it happens all the time. And I mention this because you don't know what's going to pop through,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to try.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of America. I mean, the best thing about America is how decentralized our system is. And we allow this experimentation. We allow things to percolate locally and then they go national. It's always been, that's how this story plays out. Marijuana legalization, all this kind of like, so you got to keep that in mind. And it's not, I don't know. It's, what keeps me going is just what Iowa could be.
Mm-hmm.
And just knowing that.
Yeah, if you can bring Iowa back, that would be huge. Well, I might pass you a few names of lawyers and litigators if you have some constituents in and around Iowa that are impacted.
Oh, I'm all like, that's my favorite. You got to lean into the theater. I mean, it's the lawsuits where you uncover this stuff. It was a lawsuit where I discovered the family of the dead dairy worker. They filed, after he died, they filed a lawsuit against the dairy baron. And it was in that lawsuit, those documentations, I was able to find a lot of this stuff in public records. And so it's, I don't know, I'm happy to help anyway. And it's, I can't stress this enough to people. Lean into the weird bedfellows that this moment presents itself, because it really is. It's been one of the most shocking things personally for the last year for me is seeing, I mean, I've given this talk in Saskatoon, Canada, which by the way, I never heard of Saskatoon until I came out with this book, to the Texas Hill Country, to like wherever. There's not that much in America right now this bipartisan. So you can easily feel defeated by the lack of progress. But then here's the thing. I just know in my bones, a Teddy Roosevelt's someone's going to come along.
Yeah.
Someone's going to, especially meat. Someone's going to do something about the meat packers because the politics are just too good. Like these companies just keep going too far.
Well, and the meat packers aren't even American.
Yes, they're not American, and like they're foreign-backed monopolies. Like,
Yeah.
You know what? Who knows? You can't. I'm a big believer. We live in such a volatile time. You can't have a master plan. What you got to have is a vision. Throw things at the wall, and
Yeah.
the dumbest thing will be the one that pops through.
Well, look, we have an America First president, and this is about as America First as you can get as an issue. It's our land, and it is our food, and it is the cellular health and well-being of our people. So I'm going to stay very optimistic. I'm optimistic that the state of California, has Rick Grinnell deployed as a special envoy to our state to hopefully help us sort out some of our problematic policies, especially as it relates to it's interesting because lack of proper support of ranchers directly overlaps with fire risk, because the ranchers keep the grasslands maintained and the brush from overgrowing. And you take the ranchers away, the brush overgrows, and then you have some organization that doesn't know how to manage the brush, because the animals are very helpful for land management. And when you take the animals away, the expense of managing that land goes way up. And so I don't know, for the first time, I've seen a really clear window of working with an administration that sees how interconnected all of our problems are.
And to me, what you just articulated is an ecological view. I'm so sick of this Excel mindset, is what I call it.
Mm-hmm.
the separation between ownership and farming.
Mm-hmm.
People that, when you're managing an ecosystem, you're just going to approach things very differently than someone who's just trying to get this easiest, quickest buck. I mean, you see it in Iowa. Most farmland is owned by non-Iowans. Grandma, grandpa die, kids move to Long Beach, they put it into a trust, they rent it out. The person who rents the land's not going to care for it the same. And so, like, I'm a big believer in tying a lot of, if we do any kind of conservation, whatever, you have to farm the land. Like, I'm just like really getting back. The ownership and farming need to go hand in hand again. And I think that disconnect is a lot of what's going on here, is restoring that. We can have low-wage workers for the barons, or we can have independent people doing what they think is best for their land, feeding their communities. And like, I'm a big believer in the beauty of America is decentralized systems. And so returning that kind of model. Like, every school meal should be different based on America, based on where you are. Because guess what? You're going to produce different food.
Conservation through good farming practices.
Yep.
Farmers are some of our top conservationists in the United States. And if there is any conservation group that is trying to take farmers off land, you are misguided. You are dead wrong.
I kind of think of it it's like a homeowner. You know what I mean? Someone who owns a home is just going to take care of a home better than a renter.
Mm-hmm. And again, family farms, you have to live there. If the Hansons were required to live next to their hog production,
yes.
Oh, you better believe it wouldn't be as stinky and nasty as it is now, right? Maybe we should require them to spend a week there.
That's the funny part, is even like, so much of this is, God, imagine if you regulate hog manure like human manure, the model it breaks. Like, no city would have lagoons full of 10,000 whatever that occasionally leaks into the groundwater. I mean, it is just ridiculous. And also, like, yeah, you and I can go on all day. Thanks for your, I just want to like, thank you for like your contributions in this space. I didn't know about your like Iowa buffer strip stuff either. So
the prairie strips,
Prairie strips, sorry.
Yeah, I wish it was going a little bit better, but I'm now coming to the realization that the effort really needs to be going into propping up the family farm and holding these big barons who aren't even Americans responsible for the pain they're causing here.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that there's robber barons, and the funny last thing I'll leave you with, the funniest thing about writing this book is people coming up to me afterwards tell me about new barons. So if I'm in like Minnesota, they're like, oh, let me tell you about this potato baron. Let me tell you about a carrot baron. I mean, I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous that we have a carrot baron in 2025. But that's where we are. And it's just so morally wrong, and like, lean into that, because it's just, everyone can get around that idea.
Well, thank you for the work you do, Austin. It's really great. And everyone, get out there, get yourself a copy of Barron's. It's also on Audible, right? It's on Audible, and you can get it on your Kindle as well. It's really well done. Love it.
Yeah, thanks again.